Thank you very much, Askir, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us as we welcome two authors who are definitely not strangers to AFSA and the Foreign Service. We're very pleased to welcome John Naland and Harry Kopp. They're here to discuss the brand new 4th edition of their book, Career Diplomacy, Life and Work in the U.S. Foreign Service. John is currently AFSA's Vice President for Retirees in his I think 3rd tour in that position, but he also serves as president of the Foreign Service Youth Foundation, giving a lot of service back to the Foreign Service after his retirement. He served 2 tours in my job as AFSA president, as well as also a term as AFSA state vice president. And he retired from the Foreign Service after a career that included service in Iraq and Mexico and a whole bunch of other countries. And he was also director of the Office of Retirement, and he is our expert on all things retirement in the Foreign Service as well. So thank you, John. And our second guest is Harry Kopp, who is a former Foreign Service officer as well. His postings included Warsaw and Brazil, where he was DCM. And Harry has written 3 books, all of them of great interest to us. One of them is called The Voice of the Foreign Service, A History of the American Foreign Service Association. And that is a book that we hope is currently underway with updating as we approach the centenary of both the modern U.S. Foreign Service, the Jones Act, and the American Foreign Service Association, AFSA, 1924, as it says on our coat of arms. I think I'm probably being completely unbiased when I say it is a great book. It's available on AFSA's website and also on Amazon. And I strongly recommend it if you're interested in how AFSA came to be and how the modern Foreign Service came to be. It is literally, I think, the best single work on that subject. Harry currently serves on the editorial board of the Foreign Service Journal, and he's a frequent contributor to the journal. And he's really our historian in so many ways. We don't actually have a formal historian position, but if we did, it would be Harry. So I want to thank both John and Harry for joining us. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us. We got a great turnout. And with that, let me wish everybody a great holiday season and turn it back over to our moderator, Askir. Thanks again, and have a great talk.
Thanks, Eric. Just to reiterate a couple of housekeeping things at the top. As Franny has put in the chat box, we'd like you to ask to please stay muted while we have the formal part of the discussion today, and then we'll take your questions after that portion. But let me start by kicking off with sort of a very broad question, which is ask the authors what originally prompted them to write this book.
Well, let me take that question, Askari. The origin of this book goes back to 2005 and the Una Chapman Cox Foundation, which is a foundation dedicated to a strong professional foreign service. In 2005, General Jack Galvin, who was then Dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, joined the policy committee of the Cox Foundation. And the first thing he asked was, is there a book that will teach me the basics of foreign service? And a chorus of ran around the table. No, there was no such book. Tony Gillespie, the late Tony Gillespie, a former ambassador to Chile and Colombia, took note of this question and decided we're going to write that book. And he asked me to work with him. We did indeed produce a book. Now the book in its 4th edition, Career Diplomacy. The first edition was published in 2008, second in 2011, a third in 2017, and the new edition just last month. That's the origin story of this Caped Crusader.
So as you said, you're now in your 4th edition. Have there been any recent developments necessarily that prompted you to produce a new one?
I can take that one.
Sure.
So, it's been 5 years, and it's amazing how many procedures have changed for hiring, promotion, assignment. And so the book is supposed to be, you know, an up-to-date guide for folks who want to get into the Foreign Service or want to know about it. So when you look at everything that's changed, it cried out for updating. And also the budget numbers and the staffing numbers and all kinds of 100, and we're the ones who had to nail these down, 100 different factoids, you know, really needed significant updating. And there's a new focus on diversity, obviously. And this volume, this edition of it, for the first time has an entire chapter on diversity and inclusion. And in that, we really tried to drill down on some solid statistics, you know, from the annexes of a 200-page GAA report and other places to get some real solid data on this. And some of the data we use is unclassified, but before we used it, it was non-public. So we feel very good that we ferreted it out, and that's on a whole range of issues, promotion rates, other things. A key thing about the book are interviews with current and recently retired Foreign Service members. And so that cried out for updating, getting some new interviews, you know, because there's a new generation coming into the Foreign Service, and you know, interviewing people who, you know, retired 20 years ago, we needed, you know, to get a newer take on things. And we wanted to do some work on the duty and danger chapter because, you know, danger continues. I mean, look at the so-called Havana syndrome, look at all of our folks who, with their families who've been overseas during COVID-19, all kinds of things. So we wanted to write more on that, and also make sure everyone outside the Foreign Service knows that despite all this danger, we in the Foreign Service, and of course I'm out of it now, but I'm sure I speak for the Foreign Service, you know we can't hide behind the embassy walls and get anything done for the American people. So we wanted to make it clear in the book that kind of like the fire department and the police, we sometimes have to run towards danger. And then we had to address the Trump years so that anyone outside of the Foreign Service who's maybe thinking about joining would want to know, you know, well, has it been totally destroyed? So we wanted to discuss the Trump years. And we tried to do so without getting political, but, you know, if you love the Foreign Service, it's hard to do, so.
Thank you, John. Harry, anything to add to that?
No, with regard to the Trump years, yeah, we tried to avoid prescription. We're trying to describe and not prescribe, not fix the world. But you can't talk about the Trump years without talking about degradation and depredation and defunding and all of the other horrors that were visited upon not just the Foreign Service, but the whole international affairs establishment. You can't talk about the Trump years without mentioning figures like Gordon Sondland, and, Rudy Giuliani, and Ukraine, and Marie Ivanovich. So we did talk about that. And in a year or two, those names will not be on everyone's tongue. They won't be. Probably in the audience already, people are scratching their heads and say, Gordon Sondland, I've heard that name. Who was he? So it's good to record this for posterity.
Thank you. So in your book, you describe the Foreign Service as having three dimensions, really: an institution, a profession, and a career. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, the discussion of the Foreign Service as an institution and a profession and a career is sort of the organizing principle for the book. It's three ways of looking at the Foreign Service. The institution is the men and women of the service and all their predecessors back into the 1920s and even back into the 19th century, and all of their successors. You know, the long line that has been and will be. It's the history of the service. It's a discussion of the three acts: the 1924 Founding Act, the 1946 Act that rebuilt the service and the 1980 Act that still governs it. It's a discussion of the culture and spirit of the service and how it was built. Not entirely a cheerful or happy story, I might add. We talk about the exclusionary policies that prevailed until fairly recently, the problems that the service has with patronage. These are all part of the discussion of the institution. The profession of the Foreign Service is diplomacy, and there is some controversy about whether diplomacy is a profession at all. A profession as a set of skills and a body of knowledge that its members need to master. Is that true of diplomacy? Well, probably it is. There are strict entry requirements in a profession, and there's a code of conduct, code of ethics. The Foreign Service is not the only organization that practices diplomacy. Certainly political appointees are diplomats, government officials everywhere are diplomats, combatant commanders are engaged in diplomacy, businessmen. So if diplomacy is a profession, it's a very open profession. There's no guild. There's no real entrance exam. There's an entrance exam for the Foreign Service. That's part of the career, not part of the profession. The discussion of the profession, I think, is one of the most interesting parts of the book. The Foreign Service as a career has unique features. The entrance process, the entrance at the bottom, the retirement system, the limits on time in class and time in service, the sort of opaque method of assignments. John will talk about that, I think, as we go on in our discussion, and of course we're happy to take questions.
Thanks, Eric. So not to drag you necessarily into a political discussion, but how do you see the Foreign Service faring so far under the Biden administration?
I can start off on that one. There's an old joke that the beatings will continue until morale improves. Well, the beatings have stopped. We no longer have a president who's 4 times putting forward budget proposals that would cut funding for diplomacy and development by 30%. We no longer have a Rex Tillerson who's freezing staffing and taking all kinds of other moves. We no longer have a Mike Pompeo who's fired the inspector general that's investigating him. So the beatings have stopped, but we're kind of on hold, I think. I mean, Pompeo fired the IG, but President Biden hasn't nominated a new one. The Biden administration is off to a slow start on nominations. Half of our overseas ambassadorships are vacant. Of course, there's charges holding up the fort, but half of the ambassadorships are vacant. And then we have our United States Senate that when they do get a nomination, there's about 50 of them ambassadorships kind of on hold now. So the Biden administration is saying the right thing on a lot of fronts. They want to increase funding for diplomacy and development and hire more foreign service members. But if Congress never passes an actual FY 2022 budget, then it'll be last year's budget levels that'll continue with not enough money for improving staffing and IT infrastructure and stuff. So it's kind of on hold until some real progress gets made. And especially at the State Department, I think there's a real understanding that the Foreign Service, it's coming time for reform. It's been 41 years since the Foreign Service Act was passed, but we have no, Senate confirmed Director General. We have no Senate confirmed Undersecretary for Management. And so it's really hard at state to start any kind of reform effort. And so, so we're not being beaten anymore, and they're saying these nice things about us. But in some ways, almost a year into the administration, and with 3 more to go in the current administration, a quarter of the way through, we're kind of still moving very slowly.
Harry, do you have anything to add to that one?
Now, I think John has covered that, and we'll follow up with questions, I'm sure.
So a bit of a follow-on question. Where do you see the Foreign Service heading in the coming decades?
That's a great question, which is what people say when they don't intend to answer it. Who knows about coming decades? Decades are a long time. So let me answer the question that I want to answer, which is, do we need a new Foreign Service Act? John talked about this drive for reform, and certainly there's a lot of energy and agitation for reform. Many proposals have come out from very distinguished senior diplomats, retired diplomats, from think tanks, some members of Congress. Joaquin Castro is quite interested in this subject. And there's a lot of talk about a new Foreign Service Act. This is not a subject that we cover in detail in our book, which, as I said, is not proscriptive. But you could mark me down as a pessimist. I don't think a new act is in the works. I'm not sure it's desirable to try for one, because once you start working on a new Foreign Service Act, things that you can do administratively tend to get postponed or put off. And a great deal can be done under the authorities of the 1980 Act. The 1980 Act was itself a second sister to the Civil Service Reform Act passed a couple of years before. And without the Civil Service Reform Act, we would not have had a Foreign Service Act. You had in the Carter administration a president who was fascinated by the machinery of government, was determined to make organizational changes, pushed the Civil Service Act through, and allowed then the Foreign Service Act to follow. I don't see that happening now. I do think a new Civil Service Act or a new act to protect civilian employees in civil service and foreign service would be a wonderful thing, because professionalism in the government is at risk. But I don't see a Foreign Service Act happening on its own. And if I were pushing reforms, I would try to work within the authorities of the 1980 Act, which allow you to do a great deal.
John, I'm sure you have something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Harry. And if anything, the civil service needs reform much more than the Foreign Service. Yeah. So even if, and there are no champions in the House or the Senate like there were 40 years ago or 45 years ago who are going to take this on and get floor time and muscle it through. And so hopefully someday there will be. But as Harry says, basically the Foreign Service Act is amended almost every year a little. The National Defense Authorization Act that passed the House 2 nights ago and is going to go to the Senate and go to the President has inside, there's a small section of the 2,000-page document. There's a small Foreign Service State Department Authorization Act. So it is possible to make some changes. And so I do hope we can get some made. Now, these think tanks, and I was around when Colin Powell came in as secretary and was handed a bunch of think tank reports. So these think tank reports, if you look at them, and I don't know if any of the authors are listening, but they're really only talking about the State Department econ and political cones. There's no mention of Foreign Service specialists that make up half of the Foreign Service. There's no mention of AID, Foreign Agricultural Service, Foreign Commercial Service that make up about 15% of the Foreign Service. So a lot more work needs to be done. And the thing I'd say this, and sometimes I get in trouble with fellow retirees, but I really think that the current generation of foreign service, which, is not my boomer generation, they really need to help chart this and decide which way they want to go. And a key issue is there's this continuum of conditions of the service with the uniformed military on one end and the civil service on the other. And the foreign service has always been somewhere in between. And when we're closer to the military, then we get better retirement benefits and all kinds of other stuff. But if we start sliding on that continuum closer to the civil service, like if we drop worldwide availability at hiring and things like that, then we will become more like the civil service, and our retirement benefits and other things will be in jeopardy. So I think I don't see a big giant, 200-page Foreign Service Act of 2024 coming, but I do see continuing changes. And I think those currently in the Foreign Service who still have skin in the game, are still dragging their families around the world, they really need to pay attention to this. And of course, they're represented by the American Foreign Service Association, the voice of the Foreign Service. So I obviously hope that AFSA, as time goes on, gets actively involved and not just waits for some horrible idea to come down, as this is what, someone in Congress has decided, but, AFSA proactively gets involved there. And of course, AFSA is doing that, but I think going forward, we're going to need to do more of it as if reform talk starts heating up.
Thank you, John. So just pulling our focus slightly more back to the book, what's in that book do you think would be most useful to someone who is considering a career in the Foreign Service today?
Well, I think, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, John.
Well, I think the book there's a section of careers.state.gov, which is the State Department recruiting website, careers.state.gov. And there's a quiz, kind of, is the Foreign Service right for you? And the first 20 questions are, hey, would you like to go to interesting places and meet interesting people? And so everyone's saying yes, yes, yes. But you go to the second page and it says, well, would you like to go, and I'm paraphrasing because I haven't looked at it in a while, would you want to go to some place with horrible pollution? Would you want to go someplace where you might be threatened, by terrorists, things like that? So our book, it's not a recruiting pamphlet. It's the warts and all about the Foreign Service. So anyone who's interested in joining this outfit really ought to read it to see if it's right for them, because if they do get hired and they don't like it, that's a loss for them, and that's a loss for their colleagues at some small post that's depending on them, and then they bail out. So I think in that regard, it's a good for someone to decide if they really want to get involved in this. And if they do, we do have profiles on AID, commerce, and agriculture. And so, there's not just the State Department. So someone might be interested in the Foreign Service at one of the other agencies. And we definitely profile the Foreign Service, State Department Foreign Service cones. And we talk about the different Foreign Service specialties. So people can, get a sense then of what they might want to do. And then of course, there's a 30-page chapter on the hiring process that we worked very hard on to try to get, the most up-to-date procedures and numbers. And frankly, especially on some of the alternate hiring mechanisms, they're kind of opaque, and it was rather difficult to get some real information. But we did our best, and we have that in there. So anyone interested can see it. And I just would want to point out that the State Department's recruiting website, careers.state.gov, does list this as recommended reading, although they refer to a previous edition, but this one's even better. So.
Thank you, John. I think the benefit for applicants, prospective applicants, is clear. But are there groups other than those that you think would benefit from the book? For instance, people who are currently in the Foreign Service?
Yes, of course we seek as wide a readership as possible. So this is not an objective answer. But yeah, I think the book is valuable to people in the Foreign Service. Everyone I have talked to who has read it said, I learned something. There's stuff in here I didn't know, and I wish I had known it earlier. It's good for journalists who write about the Foreign Service but don't understand it. It's good for legislators and staff members in Congress who have to deal with the Foreign Service issues and the international affairs generally. It's useful in academics, in academia, and indeed it is assigned in, I think, about 25 courses around the country. So yeah, it's a valuable book for not just for Foreign Service candidates or people who are thinking about seeking a Foreign Service career. Let me add one other thing to what John was saying. When we talk about what diplomats do, what Foreign Service does, we take a slightly different look. And while we do talk about the 5 combs, we also kind of divide the work of the Foreign Service into 3 areas: representation, operations, and policy. By representation, we mean, not throwing cocktail parties, but representing the United States to foreigners, reporting, talking to foreigners, negotiating, and advising the United States government what foreigners are up to, what they're thinking. That's all representation. Everyone in the Foreign Service is engaged in representation. You're engaged in representation when you walk down the street as an American in a foreign land. Or when you interview a visa applicant, you are representing America. Operations, carrying out programs, administering US laws that have effect overseas. Visa work is operational. A lot of management work, negotiating a roofing contract, working in a provincial reconstruction team, as John did in Iraq. That's operational work for sure. And for some Foreign Service people, there's policy at the senior levels, giving policy advice. Not making policy except in the rarest cases, but using your knowledge of foreign cultures and your ability to project how foreign countries, foreign governments, foreign societies will react to different US policies and programs. I think looking at the Foreign Service in terms of representation and operations and policy gives people a better idea of what Foreign Service work is than looking at political, economic, management, consular, public diplomacy affairs. I think those codes are really way too rigid. Everyone in service is engaged to some extent in representation and operations, and even to some extent in policy. They all overlap. I think it's really a very good way to look at what we do.
If I could add one thing about who else might benefit from the book, and I think this is fascinating. About 2 years ago, a Chinese government affiliated think tank paid Georgetown University, I don't know how much money, for the rights to translate and publish 5,000 copies of this, translated to Chinese. And as best we can tell, they translated it, looked at it, and they said, well, no, maybe we shouldn't publish this. So it didn't happen, I guess. But it does show that at least their idea was that, hey, Chinese government, military officers, intelligence officers, diplomats, think tank people, journalists, should know about the United States Foreign Service. So I definitely think our U.S. uniformed colleagues and others should too.
Thanks, John. So just one final question to wrap up the sort of formal part of this conversation. And that is, I think we are joined by a lot of our retired members today. Is there anything in the book that you think would be either new or interesting to someone who has had a full career in the Foreign Service and retired?
John, that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people join the Foreign Service and go through it and rise to high levels without knowing much about the history of the Foreign Service. And so for some of us, reading what happened during the McCarthy era and other things will be new and it's interesting because it's part of our heritage. And then, if you've been out of the Foreign Service for a while, I'm 5 years out now, you may be surprised by some of the statistics on, diversity and what the hiring process is now, and what the promotion process is, and the so-called pig in the python of, promotion rates going up and down depending on how many people were hired 5 or 10 years ago. So I think there'll be a lot of interesting, it's like going back to an old post after 20 years and seeing how things have changed. So I think that would be of interest to folks.
Harry, anything to add to that?
No, John is the guru on retirement for sure. I left the Foreign Service in 1985, so I'm not real current on some of this stuff.
All right, thank you both. So we are now going to open it up to questions from those who have joined us in the audience. We are happy to take both questions that you've typed into the chat box, or you can also raise your hand and pop up on camera and ask it in person. We're open to both, but I'm going to stop my own video so that the spotlight is on our speakers and those asking questions, but I'm going to start with some of the questions that were typed into the box. So let's do this one first. Does the book cover the experiences and opportunities of and for Foreign Service spouses?
So we definitely talk about the upsides and downsides of being in the Foreign Service with a family and traveling around the world, where you may or may not find employment and things. So we definitely covered that in terms of the conditions of service. There's not a separate section on, EFM, employment opportunities at post, things like that. So no. Now, the Association for Diplomatic Studies and Training, has had programs over the year to interview family members, and they publish the transcripts and they're on the Library of Congress website. So there's a lot of information there, but no, we didn't, have a kind of a standalone section about family member issues.
Thanks for clarifying that. And there's a quick clarification question here as well, asking whether the book is available in an ebook format or only in hard copy.
It is available in print in a paperback edition. It's available at Amazon in a Kindle format. It's available, I believe, at Barnes & Noble in Nook format. It's available on the Georgetown University Press website in EPUB format, which you can read on almost any reader. And I will mention here, since I'm mercenary, the Georgetown site, which is press.georgetown.edu, will give you a 30% discount with the code TGUF.
And I believe our lovely tech assistant, Franny, will drop that link into our chat box so that everyone can see it.
Super.
Next question. So both of you noted that you did a number of interviews with sort of new and newish officers. How did you connect with those officers?
So
go ahead.
Yeah, so until very recently, I was working in the retirement planning section of the Foreign Service Institute, and I've stepped down. So anyway, I'm retired. But for 6 years, I did that, and so people go through the job search program, and so I use that opportunity to interview Foreign Service members who were ending their careers. So yes, they had joined 20, 25, 30 years ago, but they also had supervised there had been recently DCM's ambassadors and section chiefs supervising the newest entry-level officers. We don't call them junior officers anymore; they're entry-level officers. So so there was that perspective. We did not kind of reach into the active duty ranks and do focus groups or anything like that, unfortunately. So, but
there is a Facebook group of officers who have recently left the service, not necessarily retired, and several of the people we interviewed were identified through that group. Also, authors who contributed to the Foreign Service Journal on interesting topics. We sometimes call them up and ask for elucidation or further work on that topic. And it's people we know. All kinds of ways in, and one contact leads to another.
Thank you both. We have a question here. So is the book a tool that GTM, formerly known as HR, uses in the recruiting efforts, or have participants in the Hometown Diplomat program successfully used the book to educate home audiences?
So I believe that Cox Foundation has given 100 copies to the Talent Acquisition. Is that the new name? Anyway, the GTM's Talent Acquisition Office. And I believe they've distributed some to the diplomats and residents, but you'd have to ask one of them. So, I know it's been made available, given to GTM, and but I don't know any more than that. So
the book's been out only 4 or 5 weeks, so the momentum is building.
Here's a question that was emailed to us ahead of the program, and it is, it says, I am a retired Foreign Service, currently teaching at the university level. How would I go about connecting with the authors to find out whether I could use their book as part of my curriculum?
Well, you can connect with this author at my email address, which is hwkopp@icloud.com. If you are interested in a bulk purchase for academic use, it's best to contact the Georgetown Press marketing office. And if you get in touch with me, I can go ahead and and send you to any other contacts that you would need to get in touch with. But yeah, bulk orders can come at a deep discount.
Thank you for clarifying. We have a question in our chat box, specifically about Loy Henderson, and whether it is time to rethink his designation as Mr. Foreign Service as not necessarily being ideal for the 21st century.
Sure. The answer to that is yes. And it's not a subject I really would want to get into here, but yeah, Mr. or Ambassador Henderson had some prejudices that were widely shared in his day, particularly in the Foreign Service, and they're not modes of thought we want to honor today. So yes, I would want to rethink some of that.
Thank you. We have another email question, and it's asking about your writing process. How did you collaborate on writing this? Did you were each of you assigned to chapters? Did you bounce the manuscript back and forth? How did you come together on a final version, sort of being two authors?
Well, yeah, we broke we had a third edition to work off of. And we agreed pretty early on what we needed to take out and what we wanted to put in. We had agreed with the publisher to keep the book at about the same length. So for everything we wanted to add, we would take something out. We about a third of the book is new material. We divided the chapters up between us. Each of us would draft his chapter, and then we would exchange the drafts. So I would edit John's drafts, he would edit mine, and we just go back and forth until we had agreed on a text.
And not to think too far ahead, but I assume there are thoughts of the 5th edition already in your minds?
No. Yeah, no, I don't think we've crossed that bridge yet. John?
No, I would like to pass the torch to someone, newer, with newer experience of a new generation, because I want to make sure we're writing about today's foreign service and tomorrow's foreign service, not about yesterday. So I'm ready to pass the torch to someone else. And it'll be 4 or 5 years from now. So it's, it's a ways.
Yeah. 4 or 5 years from now, I think it will still be a valuable franchise, but I think it may need new direction.
Well, you heard it here first. So if anyone on the call is interested in picking up this torch, you know how to connect with John and Harry.
That's it.
So another question that we have here is, when you look back at the 1st edition and compared with the new 4th edition, what changes have surprised you the most, not in terms of writing, but in terms of the realities of the Foreign Service and the Foreign Service career?
I would say the biggest surprise to me was the arrival of the Trump administration and the attitudes toward the Foreign Service that it possessed, and policies that it adopted. A return in many respects to the 1950s. And I sure didn't expect that. It was a staggering surprise to me, even after the election and the confirmation of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State. I had no expectation that the management of the State Department would be so inept and counterproductive. That was a stunning surprise to me.
And to me, the surprise between the volumes is how much things really have changed. I mean, the 2nd and 3rd editions, were all about Iraq, Afghanistan, unaccompanied tours, transformation. Remember the term transformational diplomacy? I almost couldn't remember it now. And that was like the big thing. So it's amazing how, that kind of zoomed up and was a huge issue, and now it's gone down. And I hope, in the 7th edition, there's not a huge section about, service in a war zone, but there's this cycle. So it's amazing how many things really have changed over the years, even in the course of 5 years. And so that's why these new editions have been merited.
Yeah, as they say in architecture, form follows function, and that has been true with the Foreign Service. When the Foreign Service had to, when large numbers of Foreign Service people were sent into war zones, once in Vietnam and then again in Iraq, the shape of the service changed and adapted to that function. In the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, as John says, the Secretary talked a great deal about transformational diplomacy, and it was thought to be the basis for the Foreign Service of the future. But once the United States got out of the business of placing civilians in that kind of environment, then the idea that transformational diplomacy designed to transform foreign societies, whether they wish to be transformed or not, that just faded away.
So here's a slightly different version of that same question. Was there anything that you were surprised or disappointed to see that hadn't changed since the 1st edition?
I'll speak for myself here. I have watched the department now since the 1970s contend with diversity in the workforce. Many ringing declarations, many impassioned statements, and yet when you look at the numbers of people from different backgrounds, change, particularly in the area of racial and ethnic backgrounds, has been slow, it's been halting, it's been very difficult, it's run into some opposition. The truth is, no one has been able to square the circle between affirmative action and appointment and promotion by merit. There's a tension there that has not been resolved. And yes, it's been a great disappointment to me that the department and the service have not done a better job of dealing with this long standing and long recognized problem.
I have two disappointments. One is the Foreign Service culture. You know, if an embassy blows up, we will jump on an airplane and fly there to pick up the pieces and to face the threat. But we won't, you know, counsel a subordinate on poor service, you know, or things like that. So, and when we're up with other, you know, up against other agencies, sometimes we don't have the sharp elbows that I think could advance our agenda more. And that's my take. And the other thing is training. Even if we do get this training float, a lot of folks in the Foreign Service will avoid it. You know, they think they know everything, and they, you know, they can get the post and in 3 weeks learn and go for it. They don't see the point of, you know, going to the National Defense University, or you know, if we had the opportunity, getting a master's, you know, at Harvard, or you know, working for a year in a private company on an exchange program. So I think we need to get away from this thing that, you know, we're kind of Renaissance people and we don't need any training, professional or functional. So those are kind of my disappointments.
Thank you. And we've got another email question, sort of more about writing and being an author. Do you, either one of you, have any advice for someone who is interested in writing a book, in working with a publisher, maybe specifically a university press?
It's interesting. That's the second time I've gotten that question in the last 2 days. University presses have good websites with instructions on how to submit a proposal. When you see what is involved in a book proposal for an academic press, you'll probably think twice, do I really want to commit myself to doing this? But if you follow the format of that an academic press wants for a book proposal, you'll understand how to shape your book. You'll understand what kind of research you need to do and how to bring your idea to fruition. You see, once you see what's involved, you can then make a good judgment about whether you want to devote the time necessary to complete the project. Having said that, that's not at all what I did with career diplomacy back in 2005, but it's the advice I give others. Tony Gillespie and I had, as I said, this idea for a book. We did a proposal, but did not write sample chapters at any length, and just kind of threw it over the transom electronically at Georgetown Press. We had tried first to find a commercial publisher, but failed to do so for very good reasons. The main reason being that we could not convince them that there was a wide audience for this book. But we were successful with a proposal at Georgetown. And, you know, I just sort of look at the websites of the academic press, see how they want a proposal, and then decide, do I want to go for it? Do I want to make the commitment? And it is a sizable commitment in time and effort. to produce a book.
And I'll just add, as someone now living on a fixed income, don't expect to make a lot of money on a book like this. It's been kind of a volunteer effort for this edition. For the previous editions, the Cox Foundation was able to provide some money to help with our time in writing. But for this edition, that wasn't available, so we kind of did it kind of on a volunteer effort. And we will get some royalties, but it's much lower than I had anticipated. So if you have a issue you're passionate about and you're a subject matter expert and you want to share your knowledge with the world, then that's why you would do it. But don't expect, to get big paychecks.
I think I'll share no secrets if I tell you that the standard royalty payment for an academic press is between 12 and 15% of the publisher's net. Not the publisher's gross, but the publisher's net. So that's not a lot of money.
So not a get rich quick scheme, clearly.
It's not even a get rich slowly scheme.
All right, we're sort of coming towards the end of our hour here. We're happy to entertain a couple more questions if anyone would like to jump into the fray. As I said, we're happy to accept questions typed into the box, or you are also welcome to raise your hands and do it in person. And I've just got an email question. Are you going on a book tour is the question.
No plans now for a book tour.
This is our book tour.
Yeah, we'll be doing a video at Georgetown Press that they will post on their YouTube channel, and we may do some appearances at on campus or in bookstores. But no, there's no book tour.
Sure, the questioner is disappointed to hear that. I assume you are open to speaking to Foreign Service Retiree associations and classrooms around the country if those opportunities arise?
Yes, or to World Affairs Councils and Great Decisions, and those kinds of gatherings are good places for presentations.
Very good. Gentlemen, any final words that you'd like to share with us before we wrap up our event today?
Well, let me just say thank you to AFSA for putting this together, and thanks to the audience for tuning in. I've certainly enjoyed this, and I hope to be able to do some more of the same.
And I want to thank everyone for tuning in and for your continuing, interest in the Foreign Service. Whether you're active duty or retired, not many people understand this, and one of the main goals of this book is to help more people understand. And we're coming up, as Ambassador Rubin said, on the 100th anniversary of the Foreign Service and of AFSA. So stay tuned as we get closer to 2024. I chair the Centennial Celebration Committee. You'll be hearing a lot more about celebrating the 100th anniversary.
All right, thank you very much. Our thanks to Harry and John. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Happy holidays, and hopefully we'll see you all in different events in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.